Welcome to Stronger Together, a powerful podcast series hosted by Impact Community Services. I'm Tanya O'Shea, Managing Director of Impact, and I have the pleasure of frontlining this little passion project of ours. In the podcast, we dig into some of the meaty social problems that people are facing within our communities, and we chat with guests willing to tackle the hard conversations. We want you to be kept informed and updated on the latest information, yet are also aware that some of the topics address sensitive issues that could be triggering or distressing for some listeners. If you find any of the content challenging, we encourage you to pause the episode and seek immediate support. Information on where to seek help will be provided at the end of each episode and also on Impact's website, impact.org.au. Please prioritise your well-being while listening. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we live, work and meet. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, traditions, the culture, hopes and values not only of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but of all Australians. Now, let's delve into the important conversations awaiting us in today's episode. Hi, my name is Tanya O'Shea and welcome to episode 10 of Impact's Stronger Together podcast. Now, as you know, each time we do these recordings or these podcasts, we like to dig into another topic, and sometimes they're a little bit more controversial than others. But what we do try to do is really push people's thinking, I guess, into exploring what ifs, what else might be possible. And I like to think of it as, you know, if you had that magic wand, what would you like to see change if you could make that happen with that magic wand? So today we're going to be exploring a little bit of that. But before we do, I would like to introduce you to today's guest, Ben Neilson, who is a local financial advisor here in Bundaberg. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Fabulous to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for making the time. Now, the first thing we would like to do today is to just cast our minds back. How many years, Ben, do you reckon? I was thinking the 1950s originally, but what do you think? Cast our minds back.
Roughly, if we can, roughly 100 years. So
Wow.
in order to contextualize that, one of the easiest ways to do it is introduce a metric. And so for the purpose of this podcast, I want to use your mum's mum to come back to the early 1900s.
Oh, my mum's mum, back to the early 1900s. I think I can imagine that. And I'm starting to imagine, so my mum's mum, I can remember, wow, my mum's mum. I can remember her, so they had a farm, they had a property, but they were such hard workers. And I can remember her work, when I think about the work that she did, it was a lot of housework. And I can remember the washing the clothes was in an old, old bathtub, but it had this wringer that used to, so it was all very manual. So it wasn't just housework, but it was all very manual, hard, and everything used to take a very long time. But during that time, you know, for women, a lot of it was housework. That was their work, and it was unpaid.
Mm-hmm.
It was just an expectation that was her role. The man would go out and he would work. So for my grandfather, he worked on the farm and they had, you know, cows, and so he did that, and he would come home and would expect for his dinner to be on the table ready for him when he got home. That's what I can remember.
It's quite interesting that you touch on that, and I'll get there in a second.
Yeah.
In particular, some got sick of those roles. So there was a young solicitor by the name of Charles Ray, who was one of the first Negroes admitted to the Supreme Court in 1911.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Charles took on a rather unwinnable case where he defended a rape accusee and got the victim off, or got the accused off. Now, when you mention the last 20 seconds of Ray, most people think that he's a male. It was actually Charlotte Ray.
Plot twist.
And she did that because every time she found herself in a courtroom, they wouldn't let her in. So she went under the bravado of Charles. This particular case, she was demanded by court ruling to get a local counsel, male, white, who was going to represent her, and she was requested to be silent for the whole hearing.
1911. 1911, and she was required. Sorry, you said requested. I'm thinking she was probably told that she had to.
It was a ruling.
Remain quiet for the whole hearing.
For the whole 8 days, and every day she broke that rule.
Wow.
And if we skip
it's
forward,
courage, isn't it?
If we skip forward to the next generation, the 50s, we see the introduction of Ginsburg, Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
So Ruth was one of 9 females that was admitted to Harvard to study law.
Mm.
And on her first day, the dean said to her, "What gives you the right to study law, taking a position that could have been filled by a man?" And her response will be written in history for the rest of ever, was that she wanted to study law so that she could support her husband, Marty, who was a lawyer, to be a better wife.
Oh.
Now, for those of you that are familiar with her,
mm-hmm.
that's an absolute understatement.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a couple of years into her universities, her husband, Marty, got diagnosed with testicular cancer. And as if she didn't have enough on her plate already, she was studying law with 2 small children. She actually decided to attend Marty's classes and take notes so that he didn't fall behind. How crazy is that?
It's quite incredible, isn't it? What an amazing woman. And she was a trailblazer all the way through for women, not just following that law pathway, but for women in general. You know, she really turned people's thinking around, didn't she? And she, just I think of the suffragettes, but I also think of these amazing women like Ruth Ginsburg who demanded change. And without them, we would be so much further behind than what we were today.
It's funny you mentioned that. People think that Ginsburg was pro-female. She wasn't pro-female. She was equal opportunity. She was anti-discriminatory. So in 1958, she took on a case on behalf of a male who was denied a carer's allowance because in that time, it was unfathomable that a male could be a caregiver. So this bloke had never married, couldn't work full-time because he had to look after his ill mother, and he requested a tax consideration so that he didn't have to pay full income tax when he was caregiving, and the court denied him. And Ginsburg took it to the 10th Circuit Court, which is about as high as it goes, and got it overturned. And then throughout the rest of her career, she won 34 landmark cases and had 161 of the 178 discriminatory laws overturned.
Wow. It blows my mind because you think, back when she was coming through, when she applied for that place, and was told, how could you possibly take this place away from a man? That persistence, the determination, the dedication in a society that demanded the same way of thinking. We all get caught in that stream sometimes, don't we? It's sort of like you get pulled into the vortex of we all think that that's societal expectation, and to try and knock that wall down or to break the glass ceiling or whatever analogy you want to put on it. But that's hard, that's really hard. And for me, I start to wonder, where did that thinking start to emerge from? Where did she start to think that she could actually start to rattle the cage a bit and create something different?
And how? So, what's your support network?
Absolutely.
Who are you talking to about these ideas? And faced with the sea of you're wrong and that doesn't work and sit down, little girl kind of concepts, which she was literally told. Where do you find the resilience and how?
Yeah. And today we've got so many different mechanisms to be able to garner support, to be able to encourage different ways of thinking, to share our views. If we think through social media, it feels like we can reach whatever audience we want to now. And back in those days, we couldn't. So now there's heaps of opportunity for us to shape thinking, to change thinking. But we still have such a long way to go, don't we? So thank you to those champions, those amazing women who have started to pave the way for change. What are we seeing now? So when we think about, going back 100 years, we think about where we're at today, 2024, and is today 46% of women. So almost 50% of the labour force is women. Yay! It feels like we've made a little bit of a pathway there. What we also know is some of those stereotypical roles that were traditionally held by men, women are starting to step into those roles. So as they're coming through school, girls, women, they're encouraged to start creating pathways that were traditionally just associated with men. So that's exciting. So it's kind of like, yay, that's awesome as well. One of the other things we're going to talk about today, though, is around that earning potential of women. So when we think back to the 1950s, women were only earning around 75% of what men were earning at that point in time. What we know today is that, that has increased. So women are probably 88 cents in the dollar when we compare men versus, what women are earning. It's sort of, we've closed that gap, and there's still a fair way that we want to go there. But what we also know when it comes to the earning potential of women is there's other factors that we still haven't addressed. So usually, not always now, but usually it's the mum has the role of, if they have a child, mum will stay at home. Excitingly, though, we're seeing more and more of the husbands or the fathers going, hey, I want to take on that role. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But what we know is around some of those caretaking duties and caretaking responsibilities, even with aging parents, women will go into those caring roles as well. So things like superannuation are affected, earnings potential. So let's talk a little bit about that, Ben, and what you're seeing in some of the women that you're working with.
Mm-hmm. It's not unique to see somebody coming in with a significantly higher superannuation balance.
Mm.
So if we talk about unadvised, what have you done without seeing us?
Mm-hmm.
And it would almost be the rule. And I suppose without influence, we're changing that. And we're also changing the barriers and the stigma around who has to do what. So I've just brought some stats for you. In 91 instances over the last 3 years, our office has recommended that the male stays home, not the female.
Wow.
And we talk about utter sacrifice too. So me and my wife do it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just because she has the biological capabilities to have a baby doesn't mean that she should financially sacrifice while she's there too. So the second she goes on maternity leave, I'll start paying her super. Why? Because she has to sacrifice everything. It's not really fair that she's broke too. So we're talking about the difference of roles. So for the 81 that we've recommended already, usually the males have some sort of blue collar work, and usually they start early.
Mm-hmm.
So we look at the financial implications of, say, leaving at 5 a.m. and finishing at 2:30 or 3:30, whatever, and not being able to raise the child, feed the child, take the child to school, whatever it might be. And then what's the impact of that? Do you take 100 grand home? Do you take 200 grand home? Do you take 50 grand home? What is it? And then what's the cost of childcare? So to put 2 kids in, I don't know, the local school before, what's it physically cost? And what's the sacrifice there? Is it worth husband going to work, leaving in the morning and taking 50 or 60 grand home versus the 25 or the 35,000 that it might cost for that care? And then we're having really open discussions around, I think you should not do that. I think you should be present in the morning. And sometimes we've had pushback. On about 28 instances, the guy has said, absolutely not. And then so we go into sort of a no question scenario where we say, if you're going to do that, you have to forfeit the morning. You absolutely have to pick up the afternoon. So 2:30 comes around, you tell your boss, you're gone. You pick those kids up, you get them absolutely ready, you do nothing. So when your lovely wife comes home, how's this for a role reversal? She doesn't do anything.
Wow.
She sits, she enjoys, dishes, it's all done. You are the hypothetical female in the 1950s instance for that, and it's the only way that this works. You have to sacrifice just as much as she does.
Wow.
And why not, right?
Absolutely, why not? So being able to have those conversations, and you called it, you said it's a really open conversation. People, both parties, all parties need to come with a really open mind about what is possible without putting barriers or boundaries or expectations around things. Is that how it works? You basically open and just put it all out on the table about this is what's possible and this is what is best in your situation.
Here's an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the math or the statistics to support it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what we expect of you. And this is a family unit is what's going to set you up. It's what going to, or whatnot. And most times the female, admittedly with these cases, is all for it, right? Why would you not be? And selfishly, being that I am male, we often don't know. So spending time at home with children is a real wake-up call to just how much we usually put on our partner's plate. So how else will we know? And also, then you can begin to appreciate everything around you just as much. We all know, we all have friends around us, and you have one stupidly high-performing female with a couple of small kids, and you look at her and go, how does she do it all? And you look at him and go, what do you do? And we're kind of challenging that stereotype now, safely.
Yeah, and that idea of here's an option. We use that with our teams here, instead of saying, well, this is done and set in stone. Okay, great, thank you. That's one option. So really what you're giving people is options. At the end of the day, it's up to the family to decide what's the best for them. But it is about making the time, creating that space, and then providing options, and for them to almost design the family environment and the lifestyle that they would like to create for themselves that doesn't disadvantage either partner.
When you say it like that, it seems quite innovation-based driven, but it's not. We just simply took the considerations out of it. So there's an office and there's a room in the office where there's balls and games and stuff, and pop your kids in there because we need them quiet. We need you focus.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you actually take stress off them as well. So how else are you expected to mitigate two small children running around the office while mum's supposed to pay attention and dad's getting frustrated? We need them in that environment. And then once you do that, we just simply say, here's a couple of options, like you say, and each have ramifications. So you do this, you retire at 45. You don't do this, you retire at 70. It's your choice. And that way they can actually have some ownership to it. We chose this. And sort of supportingly speaking, it brings the couples together. If we have joint financial goals, then they have another thing to hinder, another notch in the belt. We're doing this together. We're back to being a family unit. Otherwise, one goes one way and the other goes the other way, and we see the inevitable, which is really unfortunate.
Absolutely. And money, I guess, in society, money is almost like the secret in many relationships. It's the thing that's not openly talked about. So when you say, oh, you almost make it sound innovative, I'm calling it out that it is innovative. This concept that people and families get together, they create time, they create space, they put energy in to being open and transparent and talking about money really openly without secrecy, but looking at how it can benefit both. People don't create time for that. They're so caught in the whirlwind and the grind sometime of life that this is a real opportunity, I would call it, a real opportunity that if people want to create the pathway rather than get just caught up and go, now I'm 70. Where did all that time go and why am I still working? It's a way to disrupt the pattern, isn't it?
Yep. And why not? Like, not that I'm taking a shot at anyone, but who wants to do the same job for 50 years? Like, that was the last generation and they didn't enjoy it, so why should we? Your life is for living, and if we have the conditions and the ability to do it, why not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Completely agree. So let's talk a little bit about this thing called money. Just generally. Why is money such a taboo topic with people in your experience? What's with that? Why the secrecy?
There seems to be a lot of work in this. So we're very, very lucky that Brene Brown exists. But there's a lot of shame affiliated with money.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of social stature too. So if I earn 40 grand and you earn 60 or 70, statistically, I'm less valuable than you are. And we see it often. Whereas this generation seems to figure out exactly what they need to survive and do that and focus. So I teach up here at CQ, and we are seeing students do exactly what they need to do because they've got an absolute scope on their trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
We might have a whole course of 12 units, for example, and they'll cherry pick 4, and then they'll go to another course and they'll cherry pick 3 because they know exactly where they're going.
Mm-hmm.
And so the norms of, shall we say, importance in society is decreasing, and we're seeing more people talk and talk and talk. And then there seems to be more associations with kind of off-the-cuff financial advice too. So if you've ever gone to a restaurant with your mate, 2 seconds into it, you're talking about the house that you're going to buy or the super balance that you're going to do or, salary sacrifice. I've never been exposed to it in the last 15 years of practice as I have post-COVID. So we're seeing people go, I don't like where I am and I don't know how to get there, and you're my mate. So you tell me how you got a step ahead, and then when I figure it out, I'll tell you how I got a step ahead. It's actually quite beautiful. I often find myself at restaurants and stuff thinking, my job's gone. And also, why do I need it? Why am I charging for it? If they can find it, find it. Because if you win, we both win.
Mm-hmm.
So there seems to be a heightened importance or a heightened association with importance around financial. I think what people psychologically have done is figured out that if they have more resources, they don't have to do the amount of time in the job that they don't like, and that makes them a happier human. I think that's where we're trying to get.
Nice. So you touched on comparison, and this person earns more. This person has that car. Oh, how come I haven't got that car? So that jealousy, that comparison, social media does a bit of that as well, as they're on holidays there. Why? How can I get to be on holidays there? That looks amazing, Do you see much of people falling into that comparison trap still today, particularly, with social media being so alive and well and people sharing all of their beautiful, happy stories and memories on social media? We don't see some of the gritty, ugly stuff that sits behind it.
You got there pretty quick. Yeah, definitely. So you see a thing, you see a new caravan, you see whatever. And then I often think, what was the circumstances like when they got there? Like, did they just accept a bucket load of debt, or how did they, But yeah, you're seeing it all the time. I'm not quite sure what generation I am, but I think we're the last of the generation that cares. If you look at the Gen Y, they are unbeholden to anything and anyone. They're very crystal clear, and they will do the bare minimum just to get what they need. So I think we're the last generation that kind of matters in terms of, your accolades and my association regarding your accolades. I think the next generation don't care as much with respect to the next generation, of course.
People are working really hard. So, one of my values was always work hard, remain humble, be kind to people. That's what I tried to turn up and do every day. And Angela Mollard, one of the writers in the Courier Mail, sort of went, I've been working hard, as a journalist for the last 30 years more. And now it's more around, I want to have the lifestyle and I'm not willing to work as hard. But yeah, there was just this real starting to notice and see, there's more and more young people going, I don't need a house, I'll just rent, and if I can't rent, then I'll go into a share house if I can't rent by myself, and more of an acceptance that, I'm going to live my best life and I'm not going to be tied to anyone or anything around, that working hard, earning a wage every week, which, my generation, so generation Gen Xers, that's what it was all about. We all had the job, and you got the job and you worked for someone and you kept turning up for work, and you get caught in that groundhog. And Yeah, and next thing you're 70 and you retire and
Yep. And now we're seeing kids on TikTok saying, hey, look, I managed to get this bread from whatever at $3 cheaper than, and then we're seeing an absolute flurry of the same thing. So like smart, cost-effective budgeting is now cool.
yeah,
Talk
as
about
it should be. And vintage shopping, you know. So it's no longer, you know, going to the secondhand shop. It's the vintage shopping, you know. And I think some of that too has got to do with, you know, the environment and recycling and the practices and fast fashion, which I'm 100% in on. Absolutely agree. But there's still this bit in me that I'm that worker bee. You know, I like working. If as long as I'm enjoying it, you know, I'm happy to have a purpose, get up in the morning, get going and go off and try and do some good in the community. That's what fires me up every day.
What would the conditions be where that has to change for you? So if it wasn't something that you had to do and it was hard slog, how long do you think you would do it before you started looking for things like the next generation are doing?
Yeah. So I lasted 10 years in a job doing the hard slog. Ben's looking at me at the moment, just speechless, going, "Are you for real?" And for me, at that time, it was like I had dropped out of uni. You know, some people have heard me talk about this. I dropped out of uni. At that point, for me, university out of school, you go to university or you get a job. I was doing both pretty much. And then I thought, I'm having too good a time. I'm going to drop that university thing and just stay in a job that I hate, but I'll have a good time earning money while I'm going. And then I put up with that for 10 years and then thought, I'm having a child. I might just have to have 13 children just to stay on maternity leave for the rest of my life so that I don't have to work. So I had that really old traditional, you know, the stay-at-home mum, and didn't have these beautiful conversations that you're having with families around, actually, there's another way that you can do this. If you love going to work, you can do that. And if your husband wants to stay at home, he could stay at home and look after the child. And here's the way that you can both have, you know, what you want out of that. I love my kids if they're listening to this. I want to be super clear.
Just in case that was
love
a question.
My children. Love my children. But I also like coming to work. And I think there's this thing that people call around mother's guilt, you know, and I just think we've got to stop using that sort of language. It's unfair. It's unacceptable. I don't think that is fair. It doesn't mean that we love our kids anymore when we want to have purpose in our life that's outside of our children.
Yeah, and it's real. So we've recently, we're 5 months, when I say we, I mean Joe, not me. We're 5 months pregnant after trying IVF for 3 years, and we've just started looking after other people's kids so I can get my head around it. And mum guilt's real. Like I've had random women come up to me at playgrounds and say, "Oh, you're not going to use that, are you? Or that child needs something." And I'm like, "Lady, I'm figuring this out as I go, right? So you sit down and you tell me whatever." Whereas I can see how that can be taken as confrontational. And it's, you know, it's the cars, it's the thing. I've pulled kids out of cars and they've had stuff on their shirt and I go, "I don't care who did it." Whereas they're like, "Are you going to send them off like that?" Like, yep.
Sure.
Is there another way? And so how else the males especially, how do they know what's expected if they've never done it before? And it's almost like a freedom too, because if you can take that weight off your partner, you want to contribute too, right? So you can do it financially by supporting her, and also you can do it emotionally by doing everything else that's conventionally her role, because blokes don't really understand this, but women feel stress too, and your lack of decision makes their need to make a decision much higher. So you can see why they have to adopt these roles and manage you as well, which is a situation which we all seem to find ourselves in, which is just completely unfair. So if we can take steps to mitigate that and create a family or an ecosystem where you don't have to put the other partner in that situation, where eventually they're going to begrudge you. Why would they not? And it doesn't, I'm not saying sell your leg. It's actually very easy to manage. You just take a couple of steps over a couple of years. You're there.
Yeah. Great conversation. Loving this. Let's talk more about money, this scarcity and abundance that comes with money, some of the language that people use. So when I'm talking about scarcity mindset with money, talking about don't have enough, money is always like this weight that they're sort of constantly lifting around with them. There's not enough of it. They forego things because they're concerned. There's always worry attached to money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just for people who actually don't have enough of it to do what they want to. But it's for people who have got lots of money in the bank and it's still a worry to them. And they always are talking about money from that scarcity mindset. So look, can we talk a little bit about this scarcity and abundance mindset when it comes to talking about money?
Sure. We're seeing it all the time now. So we've got a thing on our website, not that this is a plug because it gets used anyway. We call it Connect. So it's basically literacy. So you can book it, it's free, half an hour. So 5 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, people used it to judge me and judge the business and decide if we're a good fit. You know, you get these head honchos, a couple of local judges, all that sort of jazz. And now I probably do 10 or 15 a week. And it's just mothers trying to explain things to their children or couples trying to help with decisions. It's not beneficial to us. It's incredibly beneficial to them. And they just jump on and they'll say something like, he thinks we should do X. I want to do Y. What do you reckon? And I'm like, well, here's the tax, conditions on each, and here's the long-term systemic benefits to both, and here's the things you got to be considerate of, yada, yada, yada. If you want physical advice, tell us, but if not, here's the, and they go, great, thanks. So I had a mum the other day from Gladstone Book, and she had a 4-year-old who was just about to have her first pay slip or her little pocket change thing. And she was saying, can you explain to me the benefits of putting some of this money in the bank to my child? I was like, absolutely. Move the laptop down so I could see it, sort of thing. But when we look at scarcity, most decisions that they sort of surround big financial purchases and the lack of preparation. So if you're earning, say, 50, 60, 80, whatever, and you want to buy an expensive thing, let's just say a car, for example, most people go, can I afford it? And what implications does it have on my, say, fortnightly pay or monthly, whatever it needs to be? And then that's where they stop. They go, that car is going to cost me $1,000 a month. I can afford it. Green light, let's roll. Whereas we would say, okay, cool. What's the loan term? What's the interest rate? What can you and I do together? How do we save 10 grand so that those repayments come down? And do you need that now? And can we get another one from Brisbane or Melbourne or Perth or whatever? And then what's all the choices around this? And then thus it doesn't have such an impact. So the first scenario might be $1,000 a month. The second scenario might be $500 a month, and it takes you a year. And then in a year, you wouldn't read about this, they often decide that they don't need a car that's expensive. Or they look at what, like a savings account or a share account or whatever, and they go, that money that I sacrificed actually earned a lot more than what that car has before COVID devalued in. And thus I'm steps ahead. And we sort of say, well, if you keep doing that for 3 years or 4 years, then you can take a day off work. And they go, how does that work? And you go, 30% or 20% or whatever, 10 grand, blah, 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 blah. In 5 years, it'll be worth 100. And then that's your Friday. All of a sudden, you're changing the narrative. So it's no longer, I'm investing because I enjoy it, or I'm preparing because of whatever. I can't tell you, which admittedly I'm guilty of. And I feel very sorry for the people who work there. But how much I love click and collect.
Yeah.
You sit from the comforts in the office and you find all the stuff on special. You buy. Some 12-year-old with their belt wrapped around twice runs it out to your car and goes, thanks, dude. And I go, I spent less time in there. I'm far more prepared. It was a third of what I would have spent if I walked in there. And all those preparations add up now. So I'm quite proud to say this. I do a lot of research and surveys for research, and they pay me in gift vouchers. I feed my whole family with gift vouchers from research, right?
Wow. Wow.
And these are the sort of things that we can say, like we look at anybody's budget and we'll say, what's the biggest outgoings? Usually it's mortgage, car, mobile phone. And we've got solutions, or we find solutions for all of those. And by reducing those outgoings, you'll actually find that you go from a scarcity to an abundance mindset. And then you grab that abundance, kind of similar to Tony Robbins before he got a bit too rich and famous. And you treat it like a tax. You say, if you were spending, say, $200 a week on that thing, how about we treat it like you still do, and we buy yourself some assets, or we buy yourself something, or you salary sacrifice, or you do something to reduce the tax or increase your wealth or whatever it is that you need to do, prepare for X or do whatever. And the more you do that, the more you elevate yourself. 4 or 5 years, most of these guys kind of forget when they get paid because they've created several other aspects of income.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, similar to you, they come to it because they enjoy it.
Mm.
Money's great,
but
it changes the I have to I want to.
Mm-hmm.
And once you do that, you've got a dangerous level of freedom where you can actually work on being a better person as well.
Wow. And which is directly linked to what we were talking about earlier with our young people wanting more freedom around the choices that they make. But having that financial freedom isn't about the amount of money you've got in the bank, right? It's about what your individual goals are, what you're working towards. But what I also heard there, without you saying it, it's around consistency. It's around the way that we're showing up. It's the habits and the practices that we put in place and being consistency, because they have this compounding effect, don't they? So can you talk a little bit more around that consistent practice? So we touched then on, you might choose this, you might choose that. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it's around being consistent. Once you choose what it is that you want to do, you've got to keep showing up to do it, right?
The easiest way I explain this, we've got an old federal judge and he's got 100 million. True story. Like, you're not going to figure out who he is. So. And he literally goes to the bank every couple of months and he moves his significant term deposit from bank to bank. And he'll get upset if he can't get 5%. And he's like, ugh. And I have this rolling joke with him where he's going to pay tax forever because he's got such a wealth. And he's 80, so he had 60 odd years to accumulate it. But if you look at 5% on 100 million, that's impressive, right? But if you look at 5% on $1, nobody cares. And so what we try to do, let's just take super, for example. If we just consistently put money into the environments where it will grow for you and then create some sort of ownership around it, this is yours. You watch it grow. The second you hit 60, that's your freedom. And then we do a couple of those others. So we might do like an investment bond, which comes out when your kid goes to, university. So you have a psychological tie to that. So there's 3 or 4 throughout your life. And then you can see what freedom it affords you. But Einstein said it years ago. It's, compounding is the 9th wonder of the world or the 10th wonder of the world. And once you put ownership to it, it's your goal. And that way you become beholden to yourself. If I don't do this, the only person that misses out is me. And then I don't get the thing that I said I wanted. So it's quite an interesting way to instill, not that they don't have it, but values into people, because I want that thing. And it's only a small sacrifice. I'm not saying put 100% of your salary in it or, start working Saturdays and Sundays. I'm saying small, consistent contributions to whatever it is that you decide is important to you will eventuate the fact that happens to you. So the decision is yours. And 94% of the people that we've surveyed over the last 6 years have done it.
Wow. That's a high percentage of people.
Crazy, right?
And the other thing that I just heard then is it's not about how much money you have, even the smallest amount, in continually putting that away. So if you're listening to this and you think, how could I possibly do that? I have got hardly anything left. Anything makes a difference, doesn't it? If you continue to keep that practice over the long term, you can start to build on that.
I'll give you one of the most bare bones examples. If you can get 25 grand into super by the time you're 25, and then you put a mere $6,000 a year into super for 40 years, do you know what you retire on? 12 million.
Oh, get out of town.
40 years, go figure.
Really?
Yep. So it's not, I'm not saying that, $6 grand is a small, but $100 a week, roughly.
Yeah.
40 years, roughly. We're going to retire on a level of wealth that has never been seen before.
Wow. That provides hope. It provides hope to people, that this is possible.
25 between, say, 18 and 25, $6,000 or $7,000 a year to get yourself up there. That's it. You're home free.
Wow. Exciting. So one of the barriers we often find with people when they talk about putting new strategies in place or new opportunities in place is time, finding the time to do it. And I was reading on the paper, The Barefoot Investor, was talking all about, there's 4 times of the year that he checks his investment portfolio. And he said it probably takes me less than 10 minutes. Or I go in and he goes, it's dividend time. And he jumps on and he said, because it's dividend time at the moment. So he's incredibly excited. And he said, I shouted it out the other night. I was lying in bed and I went, oh, wifey, it's dividend time. And she went, you're crazy. Go back to sleep, basically. But one of the things, I guess, that really stood out in there is that he made a really clear point around he doesn't spend a lot of time in once he puts the processes or the strategies in place, they pretty much look after themselves. So if we're yelling out that we're time poor, we haven't possibly got the time to even think about this. Can you talk us through what's the reality? How much time do people probably need to commit to setting themselves up for the future? And then how long does that take me sort of on an ongoing basis to keep moving forward the way that I want to?
Yeah, this will shock you. So the initial might be 45 minutes to an hour, give or take.
Okay.
And usually we facilitate, and we're not alone. Like there's a bunch of other offices in town that do it as well. Usually we facilitate it where we make sure your kids are fine, or coffees or all that sort of jazz. And then we're talking. It wouldn't be an hour a quarter. It wouldn't be 10 minutes a week, if that. Once we've set up the apps, we make sure that you're emotionally tired. It's so little.
Wow.
So doable.
So a lot of it is, when you say app, so a lot of it is automated, is it? So things are just happening in the background, because I know if things are coming out of my pay automatically, I actually don't even miss them anymore. Once it's set up, it all just happens. They do their thing. Yeah. And I forget all about it. And then I just live on the money that I've got left.
And these banks, not that I'm choosing anyone in particular, but all the local guys, they're so good. So one of the biggest reservations that we've had, which is rather valid, is if I change my bank to get a better interest rate or loan or whatever it is, I'll have to change on my direct debits. So 4 of the ones in town will literally copy your address and your BPay and all your accounts and all your direct debits and set it up in the new account.
Wow.
Isn't
and
it?
We're talking major banks, right?
Yeah.
So, major banks, so they will just make that happen seamlessly.
Everything
for
that you've
people.
got, we'll put it into this new account for you.
Wow.
So you don't even have to, which is actually quite challenging, because historically we used to change banks and then review what we needed as a direct debit. We can't do that anymore. But the technology is there to support the change, and we're actually seeing more people want to make the change. And it's become further and further too. So when we first started years ago, it was just Bundaberg. And now it's Chinchilla. We've got clients in Tully and Tassie. Like, it's just further and further and further, because people want to readdress these roles and they want to afford a life that they actually enjoy.
So what I'm hearing is banks are making it easier for us to do a deal, that's better potentially than the one that we're on. So if you have any aversion to switching banks to get a better rate or whatever that looks like, it's made easier for you.
Very, very doable.
So don't make that a barrier.
No.
Go in, have the conversation. Don't make that one of the barriers.
The only barrier that we do have, usually speaking for the males, is that we will challenge the way that you think. And often they don't like that. Okay. Which is fine. We're emotionally supportive, so have your hissy fit or whatever it needs to be. But come back. But shy of that, usually it's very doable. It's just carving out 45 minutes or an hour.
So remind me again, Ben, initially probably only 45 minutes of my time. I then get emotionally tied to what it is that I've decided or connected to, making sure that I'm very clear on what it is that I'd like to do moving forward. And then it's about
setting it all up. We automate most things. So generally speaking, again, we're not alone, but we would set up a bank account where your pay goes and then automatically. So one might go to savings, one might go to shares, one might go to super, one might go to your spouse for joint whatever. Another goes to you for spending. Very similar to the barefoot. And that's you.
Wow. And then how long will it take me just to keep an eye on all of that?
15 minutes of that.
A week?
Or once it's set up like that in a quarter.
15 minutes a quarter.
So it's not even, once you get the synergies, once it starts moving how it should, that's it.
Wow.
It's easy.
Hey, what's stopping us from doing this? Hey, what is stopping us? What is holding us back
I
from
think we're
doing
stopping
this?
ourselves.
Yeah.
Like all the information is there. You've made several references to it already. Like we know that it exists. Sometimes we just struggle to find it. With Google Scholar and with Google and with TikTok and stuff, you can just save things and have them. And we have a whole arsenal of literature as well, for the nerds like me who want to read the scientific papers.
Mm-hmm.
We have that. If not, you've got direct links to Money Smart or whatever. And we'll say, this is the statistical implications of you making this decision. Are you happy with it? And most times it's, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Go forward, young man. Excellent. Diversification, when you were talking about we're setting up different accounts to different things, so all of those different buckets, I guess, that you're setting up. Diversification is important, isn't it? That we haven't got all of our eggs in one basket.
Mm-hmm.
So for some people, superannuation might be the thing that they've got their eyes on and think, I'm sorted. Got my superannuation, I'm maxing out on the amount, that I can put into that every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got that sorted. So I feel like I'm pretty set. Now, one of the statistics that I've heard, Ben, is that 2/3 of women are now investing outside of their super, which excites me. When we talk diversification when it comes to our finances, what are we talking about? So you've touched on shares.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one option. Superannuation is obviously another option.
Yep.
Talk us through, what is not perfect, but what are some of the different models that people come up with when they're thinking diversification?
We usually look to diversify income by recreating a salary. So we'll aim to get some income from a cash account, some consistent, like Scott from the Barefoot, some consistent income from shares, some from resi and or investment properties, and some from commercial properties. And we usually try and recreate the person's salary, which only takes 4 or 5 years. Most of the houses around here, you buy them, they'll spit out 30 or 40 grand a year. You need 2 or 3. And that's kind of your salary. And then what we try to do is increase the heck out of the capital assets. And we'll strategically pinpoint them. So a term deposit or a savings account might become available in a year. And then in that year, there's a thing that you need it for. And then the same thing with the dividends. So when that thing comes out, let's just say it's in June, we'll use that money for your raise or for your whatever. So those big ticket items that are coming up, you don't have to stress because there's a mechanism to pay for it. Same thing with the rent, for example. You buy one, you put a second house, whatever. You pay your interest and your loan, and the rest is yours. And then because it's deductible, we might put some money into super or whatever it is. And what you're doing is just affording yourself to skip forward a couple of years. If you did nothing and you had 40 grand, next year you'd still have 40 grand. So what we try and do is double that to 80, and then you've bought yourself 2 or 3 years. And that's the way that we go from, say, a 25-year-old retiring at 70 to a 25-year-old retiring at 45.
Mm-hmm.
Our parents did it. My dad is religious for it. He only knows property. He said to me the other day, do you know Vanguard? And I was like, oh, you mean the biggest investment manager in the world? And he's like, yeah, they look pretty good. And I was like, good on you, mate. Saying that, he's got 16 houses. He doesn't understand anything but houses. And intuitively, he did the same thing too. So he bought a house. He's like, this works. I'll buy another one. And then that's all they did. Whereas he's been very, very lucky and very protected. But if those houses were, for example, in Brisbane and we had COVID, he's in big trouble. So what we usually try and do is mitigate the risk by buying other things. Even with shares, you've got indexes, you've got Australian, you've got massive emphasis now on ethical investments, which are doing quite well. A lot of people are enjoying them. It's very, very doable, and it just segregates your future.
Yeah. So some of our listeners don't have a lot of money. For our clients who might be listening to this, to give them some hope. So, we talked a little bit earlier around you only need this amount, and for some people that will be a stretch. What strategies do you have for people who are maybe earning the pension, maybe earning minimum wage? How do they get started? How do they really start to build some momentum and have some hope over time that they can put some money away?
Sure. First thing we do is reassess the costs. So if your income is fixed, that you have to sort of reassess where you're spending it. And then once you find that, so if we can revisit a phone bill, or, look at cheaper petrol, picking up the bus, or whatever it is, then we use that income to put in a position where it creates more capital exposure. So, for example, you save $15 a week on the bus or whatever, and then you start putting that in a cash account and earning 5%. All of a sudden, it's doing something for you. And so just small incremental steps there, and before you know it, it's worthy. It's worth something that is yours and helps you along the way.
Small, incremental, consistent. Ben, before we finish up, one of the other things, and I'm big on language, big on emotions, big on how our thinking drives our behaviour. So often hear people talk about money and that I'm not good with money, I don't understand money, my husband looks after all of the money. That language and that unwillingness to sort of learn about money and what it can do for you as a tool. I've seen women, particularly my age, so, getting on 50, 60, relationships break down. They find themselves homeless. They find themselves without stable accommodation. They're finding themselves living out of cars, finding it really hard, and sometimes even without a job and no income because maybe they haven't been the income earner in the household. So for anyone, I guess, who goes, oh, no, I leave that to my husband. Oh, no, that's not something, I'm not good with money, so I don't get involved in that part of the relationship. What advice do you have for them?
You're not going to like it. It's very nihilistic. He will die and you will have to. So do you want to do it by choice or by, because it's really, really unfortunate. It does happen. And being as that you touched on language there, that tells me that person has never been supported to learn. There's no interest, So if you sit with that person and say, we're going to do this because you're going to need to know, and the sooner we can figure it out, the sooner you can contribute, it changes everything. And a lot of the times we are treating, even though they're together, we treat females as single. So we say, if we look at the stats, the divorce rate is through the roof. Men usually die first. There's a high possibility here that something might happen. And when that happens, we need to make sure that you are okay to stand on your own 2 feet. Should anything happen for whatever reason, and it brings them into the conversation. Otherwise, and we've done a bunch of research on this. This is not just me. I often don't know why men make decisions. They're individually affected by a bunch of biases, and not many of them know it. So why the default to making financial decision is on the bloke's shoulders, given that they're often unaware of the cost of their own household. I don't know why that happens. Usually, we'll say to the female, you feel like you've got a much better handle on this. Is that right? And she'll say, no. Not say, right, you don't make any decisions. We make decisions through you now. And because of that, it brings them in and it elevates them, and they make a sense of not supremacy, but somewhat superiority, because they can do the things that we need to do. A lot of the times the men says that it falls to the wayside. It's not my job. It's not my thing. Yada, yada. It seems to be doing fine. Yada, yada. And you're like, yeah, but it can do better. So we often treat females with sort of like a bit of elevation in order to make sure that they are fine regardless of what happens in the relationship. And I genuinely think that they appreciate it without antagonizing everyone.
Nice. Emotions attached to money? What do you notice? Because, I've seen some really heightened, money brings anxiety, it can bring worry, it can bring frustration. What have you seen, and how, I don't know, do we just calm the farm a little bit around that attachment, those feelings that come with money?
It's just management, you know what I mean? Like, if you're going to give bad news, have a solution or minimize it. So we'll get through this together, which we do. There's not one case that we've not been able to manage, and we're not alone to it. Like, everybody in town does it. And so as long as you have a solution and you're willing to sit with that person in their time of need, especially around death, one of the big ones that we often see is somebody comes in and they say, oh, someone's passed away. What do I do? And you go, let's just assume it's unadvised. It takes about a year to clean an estate, give or take. And next to no one's prepared for that. If you can show me the amount of people that can fund their lifestyle for a whole year without any input, I'll eat my hat. So it's not often that it happens. So as long as we have solutions, we can manage those people. And as long as you address the root cause, so a big one is that blokes often like to prepare for the future, and my wife included. Look, they need time off. So we've just come back from Melbourne. Not that that part's important, but we got there because Joe and I agreed to put money into an account, and when the account got to a certain number, we went to Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened.
Planning.
So as long as you have support around those things, you can address the emotion. But if you do it without it, you're in big trouble. They'll leave.
Yeah, it's complex, but yet in talking to you today, it feels so easy. When you think 45 minutes, that could be the best 45 minutes that you have spent in your week, in your year, in your whatever that looks like, in your life for some people. 45 minutes. I think that's achievable for most people.
Well, the kicker too, like most of the products, not that this is a product bagging session, but most of the products that we use now, there's nothing wrong with them. So if you use the Connect that's on our website, it's free. So what do you have to lose? Again, not that this is me, we're already busy, but anyone can find it, and the solution is absolutely there, and it's just a mere Google click away.
Exciting. That is amazing, Ben. We've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone back to the 1900s. And we've now looked forward, and the change that has happened over, throughout that century, but also the exciting changes that we still have ahead. In talking about our young Gen Zs, I think we're up to our Gen Zs and the way that they see the world and the future and the freedom that they want to be afforded through their life in the choices that they make and the decisions that they make. However, at the root of all of that, today at the core of it has been that discussion around money. And for me, when I break it down, I really try and keep emotion away from money personally, and just think of it as a tool, as you do with anything else that you have. It can give you freedom, but a lot of the time it'll be driven from the choices that you make. So whatever path you want to take money on for yourself, there's choices, there's decisions that you attach to that tool. And it will go with you, but it could take you down a really bad path, or it could take you down a really prosperous path, depending on the decisions that you choose to make with it a lot of the time. So is there anything for you, any actions, any key takeaways, and it could be 2 or 3 things that you just wanted to leave with our listeners to take away from this episode?
Yeah, independence or financial independence is very easy. It's not as overwhelming as one might think. All you need is someone that's willing to support you through decisions and guide you. And then once you do that, not only do you help yourself, but often you help people around you. So if I can, because I'm an academic at heart, they did studies in low socio-economic countries where they surveyed a thing called spillover effects, i.e. knowledge. If you know something and you know it well, how likely are you to share other people once I'm sure you've read these as well, but they found with children and anyone under 25, so between 5 and 25, they found that the spillover effect for financial literacy was 71%. So if you're willing to sacrifice and learn that thing that you are understandably uncomfortable about, you will help roughly 7 of your 10 mates. So by seeking, you actually afford people around you the ability to be better as well.
Love that ripple effect that we can create. You touched on Brene Brown earlier, vulnerability, bringing vulnerability to it, bringing that sometimes we armor up is exactly what she would say, in these conversations, because we feel like we've got to have our shield and our armor on to have some of these conversations, and it's about how we strip that armor away. We open up, we be vulnerable, we put it all on the table, and we find a better way. Get you good people around you who can support you in some of those key decisions I heard Ben just say there, and find a way forward, because there is hope and you don't need a lot of money to be able to do that. Thank you, Ben. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for being so generous with your time and the amazing information that you've shared with us today. We really do appreciate that. It's been incredibly valuable.
Thank you for the invitation.
So thank you. And thank you for listening. We really do appreciate you tuning in to our episode 10 of Stronger Together. I hope you enjoyed that. As always, any resources from this episode will be available with the link. You have a great week and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.
Sometimes the issues we discuss in this podcast series may be triggering for some people. If you've been affected by the topics we've talked about today, please reach out to someone for help. Alternatively, you can call Lifeline 24 hours a day on 13 11 14, or you can use the chat option on their website. If you live in the Wide Bay Burnett region, you can also reach out to us at Impact Community Services. Please visit impact.org.au today. Click on the Make a Referral button at the top of the page if you wish to self-refer. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and if so, please remember to hit the subscribe button. Until next time, remember, we're stronger together.